If you guys, yeah, you'll probably have to mute yourself unless you need to ask me a question. So, tonight is my dream. I was either going to be a pastor or a history professor. And tonight I get to be a history professor. Because tonight we're going to introduce ourselves to Istanbul. Now, the trouble with Istanbul, or Constantinople, or Byzantium, is it is right at that place where East meets West. So to understand the history of Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, we need to study East and West history. 2,000 years of it in an hour. Yes. So what I want to do is I'm just going to try to show on a map how things changed and how that impacted Istanbul. So for those of you who are here, I have a printout of the slides. You can take notes if you'd like. It might help you follow along. They're pretty small, but I think everybody knows now that this is the expansion of the Roman Empire. Oops, it got held up there. There we go. Now it's going again. So from Rome was founded in 700 something BC. This map takes it from about 500 BC, just a little city in the Italian peninsula, up through the time of Jesus, about zero, and then all the way through to the time of the destruction of the Western Roman Empire. So we're going to talk about the Roman Empire, and we're going to talk about the Eastern Roman Empire. Today we think about it as the Byzantine Empire, but the people who lived in the Byzantine Empire would have never called it the Byzantine Empire. They were Romans. Rome was the capital of the Roman Empire, and the capital of the Roman Empire moved to Constantinople, and they still considered themselves Romans. So we're going to look at the Roman Empire, the part that's in the west, and the parts that are in the east. The term Byzantine Empire actually didn't get coined until about 150 years ago. So here we go. Let's see how we do. So I hope you enjoyed this map. It was nicely on loop so that you could see it over and over again. This map shows you the extent of the Roman Empire about at the time of the Apostle Paul. It's 68 to 69 AD. I've circled Byzantium on the map so that you can see where it is. So when the Apostle Paul was carrying out his ministry, the Mediterranean was the Roman Mare Nostrum, that they controlled the Mediterranean Sea. You can see that the Roman Empire completely encircled the Mediterranean Sea. They controlled the pilot of the Mediterranean Sea, also then they had wonderful roads, made it a marvelous place for the Apostle Paul to carry out gospel ministry. We have no indication that Paul was ever in Byzantium. He wanted to go into that area on his second missionary journey, and the Holy Spirit kept him from going there. So we're walking into an area that Paul didn't walk into, but a lot of Christian history happened there. This next map shows you the Roman Empire at its greatest extent under Hadrian. Hadrian, you might know Hadrian because in northern England is Hadrian's Wall. That was the extent of the Roman Empire to the north. They couldn't control those Scots, and I am very proud of that because I am 37% Scottish, and I am a Scottish laird. I own 1 square foot of Scotland. Uh, but so Hadrian's Wall up in the north, that was the largest expansion, and after that, it contracted. About 150 years later, under Diocletian, the empire was really divided into 4 sections. The emperor recognized that it was such a huge territory that one man couldn't control it. I think most of the time when we think about the Roman emperor, we think about him sitting in a palace in Rome. He probably spent very little time in the palace in Rome. He was out on the frontiers, battling invaders, keeping the empire intact. And Diocletian said, we can't make that work. It's spread out too far. So let's see if I can make this go away, maybe. It didn't want to. There we go. So you can see that there were 4 different areas. There was 2 Augustuses. They were the major emperors, and then 2 Caesars, which were like the emperors in waiting, and they each controlled a part. So there were 4 different parts to the Roman Empire. No, I suppose I messed it up that it doesn't click for me, huh? There we go. The Western Empire continued to grow weak, and Emperor Constantine moved the Roman capital to Constantinople. This was in the 320s AD. So when we visit Constantinople or Istanbul, we're actually going to be at a place where there were probably more Roman capital buildings than anywhere else, even than Rome. Rome was an isolated place on a peninsula. It was a very hard place to control the empire. He moved the capital to Istanbul or Constantinople. He renamed it from Byzantium to Constantinople. He was a humble man. But he chose that place because it was, this crossing point between East and West where you could carry out battles East and West. At most of the Roman Empire from Hadrian on, they were constantly battling the Persians. They could never control the Persians. So to the east, there was always warfare. So they needed to be closer to the east. After Theodosius in 395, there was an official split in the empire. Prior to that, even though there were 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars, that they still considered it one empire. After Theodosius's time, it split between the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. So you can see that on the map. So I'm just showing you a map to kind of help you see, okay, the world is changing, and Byzantium, Istanbul is right at the center of it. That's what we get to see. The Western Roman Empire didn't fare very well. All of these arrows on the west, here in the western part of Europe, are the invasions of these different tribes. That tribes came from the steppes of Russia. You've maybe heard of Attila the Hun. So these tribes came, displaced tribes in Europe, and those tribes moved into the Roman Empire and gradually took on more and more of the Roman Empire. You can see that the Eastern Roman Empire was largely spared of that. They did lose a lot of, what we would call Greece and used to be Yugoslavia, Serbia, and the Balkans area. The Eastern Roman Empire lost that, but by and large, they were not affected by all of these tribes moving in. Interesting, when I was reading about this, they're always learning more and more, and something that also played into this, the weakening of the Roman Empire in the West, was two things. There was a change of climate, that there were three major volcanic eruptions in this time period, and Europe cooled, and the crops changed, the climate changed. That and the Black Plague, the bubonic plague, which we think of normally in the 1300s, but it also hit in the 500s in the Roman Empire. And the fact that, the Mare Nostrum, we control the Mediterranean, and we can ship goods across the Mediterranean and have all this commerce, that's great. But that also meant the plague spread all over the Roman Empire.
Black Death came from the east. 430.
Very good. Yes.
They came into the forts.
Yes. And did the same thing again then in the Middle Ages.
Spread so easily.
Yeah.
Climate.
And when we think about plagues, when we were first talking about the COVID pandemic, and what's the mortality rate, and at first they were thinking the mortality rate is like 5%. And truly, as COVID began, I was doing the calculations and going, okay, we're going to lose a couple of hundred people here at St. Paul's from, this plague. Black Death, you're talking more like 30% of the population. So whole areas are just depopulated. And so that also played into the weakening of the Western Roman Empire. So the weaker the Western Roman Empire gets, the more important Constantinople gets, right? Here is a map that shows how very rapidly the territory that Rome controlled was reduced. So on this map, you can't really see it very well, but the Western Roman Empire controlled the Italian peninsula, and they controlled this northern part of Gaul, and the rest of it was all these other, we would call them, heathen tribes came in and gradually became Christian. This would have been from about the 400s through the 500s is when they were, the Western Empire basically fell very shortly, really, after the split. The Eastern Roman Empire, then Rome fell in the 400s. It was sacked a couple of different times right in that time period. The Eastern Roman Empire expanded at some times. So in 555 AD, this is as large as the Eastern Roman Empire with Constantinople. This is as large as the empire got. All the way over to Spain, it was almost, trying to get back to the good old days, right? This was under Justinian, Christian emperor, but it didn't last very long. Because right at that time then, the Persian Empire is growing larger. So here we see the two major empires, the Persian Empire, this big yellow blob, also called the Sasanian, and then the Eastern Roman Empire in the purple, two major empires in 600 AD. And then what happened? The world changed, right? Muhammad lives in the early 600s AD and dramatically changes the history of the world. But until that time, Christianity spread rapidly. I found this map that just shows the darker colors are where Christianity predominated by 325 AD, when Constantine legalized Christianity. Up until that time, it was really not necessarily protected, but Constantine said, legalized it. And then by the 600s, just before the Muslims, you can see how Christianity became the predominant religion of basically what we think of as the ancient Roman Empire, even though the Western Roman Empire by this time had disintegrated. So these Germanic tribes that had invaded Rome became Christian, which is, by the way, part of the problem with Christianity in Europe. Because when the chieftain became a Christian, everybody in the tribe became a Christian because everybody followed the chieftain, right? So if I make, this is what I believe, and because you're my followers, you have to believe the same thing. Your minds don't necessarily change, right? Your actions don't necessarily change. You've just got a new identity. I'm a Christian now. We've all gone down to the river and we've gotten baptized, but their lives were still heathen lives. And when you are overwhelmed with horrible Christians living horrible lives, what do? Well, we better make some laws to tell them how to live. How did the church become so legalistic that eventually became the Roman Catholic Church? Because these tribes became Christian like that, because their chieftain became a Christian. Not everybody's heart and mind were changed. They just, oh, I'm a Christian now. So, blessings and challenges in throughout church history. All right, I'm going to pause right here and just, are there questions up to this time? Because now we're going, so we've covered the Western Empire demise, the Eastern Empire is in existence, and now the Eastern Empire is going to get a new challenge. Questions?
So at this point, when everybody becomes Christian, all the power kind of concentrates in Rome because Rome is calling the shots.
Well, so the power concentrates in five great cities or churches. Rome, because it's the capital of the Roman Empire. Constantinople, because it's the capital of the new Rome in the east. Antioch, because it is the mother church, a missionary church. Jerusalem, and Alexandria. And once the Muslims come in, three of them get lost, right? Jerusalem is taken over by the Muslim conquests. Antioch is taken over by the Muslim conquests. Alexandria in Egypt is taken over by the Muslim conquests. It leaves just Rome and Constantinople as the major players. And in our history, Rome gets more power and authority because we are predominantly Western European. If we were predominantly Eastern European, we would go, oh, and don't forget Constantinople. So there is this split in the Christian church. But yes, Rome and the Pope gets more powerful because the emperors get less powerful. There are people, Rome is no longer the center of the world. Rome is not an important city necessarily for the Roman Empire. And so the bishop becomes more and more important in that city and actually negotiates, settlements with some of these invading tribes. Is that?
Going back to the plague, I once read an article or a small book about how the plague affected the economy of Europe and all the Roman world because so many people died that whole families would be wiped out that ruled a certain area. So all the peasants were able to got rich because they were able to take over the land. And whoever didn't die became rich because now they had whatever was left.
You can move into the house that you wanted, right?
Master's house.
Right.
farm it, keep everything that you farm, you know, and so the economy really screwed up because of the plague.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting to read.
Uh, it's just it would have been a horrible thing to live through, but to see God had some plans and purposes in it, you know, helpful for us sometimes to remember that. John.
I think at that time, weren't there two Antiochs or earlier? Was there one in Syria and one in Turkey? Which one would
So the Antioch in Syria,
Syria?
the Antioch in what is Turkey,
Yeah.
that was the Apostle Paul's hometown, not an important city. The Antioch in Syria was the capital of the Seleucid Empire. You know, the Greek Empire that grew out of Alexander the Great. Antioch was the capital, so it was a major city. So these are major cities, and so the bishop who becomes the leader of the church in these major cities then become have influence. I think there's some to everybody looks, we're one of the big churches in the area. People look to St. Paul's. What's St. Paul's doing? Well, that same thing happened back then. Only thing, then these bishops, they were metropolitans, they were called, then actually said, okay, now you are under my authority. And gradually their areas of influence and their power over their local churches increased. And at after the Muslim conquest, it's only Rome and Constantinople, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, and the Patriarch in Constantinople. About 1000 AD, they excommunicate each other, basically because I'm right and you're wrong. No, you're wrong and I'm right. And the split has been ever since 1054 AD. Right. So going on to the Muslim conquest and how that impacts Istanbul. So the Muslim conquest began in the 620s, very quickly take over Saudi Arabia and go to the east. They also go up into what we would call Turkey today. And so you can see the Eastern Roman Empire is being pressured, is the first really one to be pressured by the Muslim conquests. And by the middle of that century, just 30 some years after Muhammad began the Muslim faith, they controlled most of what we would call, the Arab world, and there was still this the Byzantine Empire, but that changed very quickly. Within the next couple of hundred years, the Muslim conquest continues to grow, takes over Spain. So Spain is another one of those places where there's this interesting mix of cultures, East and West. We have the Muslim attempt to take over Europe from that direction. They were turned back in the 720s AD. And then here's the little Byzantine Empire compared to what it used to be in the good old days. Continues to reduce in time. Kind of the death knell of the Eastern Roman Empire came from not the Muslims, but the Christians. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade conquers Istanbul, or Constantinople at that time, and divvies up what was left of the Roman Empire. It's still called the Latin Empire that controlled Constantinople was still called the Roman Empire, but it was very, very small. And then finally, In 1450, the purple is the extent of the Byzantine Empire. The Ottoman Empire controls on either side of it. And in 1453, Constantinople falls and becomes a Muslim city. And the person who took it is Sultan Mahed the Conqueror. So we're going to get to see the top copy. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. We'll see when we get there. But this palace that is right on, this overlooking the strait, the Bosphorus Strait. The person who conquered Constantinople in 1453, 6 years later, begins this palace, and we'll get to see this palace. This palace, the Hagia Sophia, which was built by Justinian. Remember that map where the Eastern Empire was at its largest? That was Justinian. He built Hagia Sophia in the 500s AD. We'll get to see Hagia Sophia. It was a Christian church. Then it became a mosque, and then it is now a national museum. And then we will also see the Blue Mosque, which is all in that same area. This map shows the expansion of the Ottoman Empire under my favorite historical figure, Suleiman the Magnificent. What a great name. Magnificent. Why is Suleiman the Magnificent so interesting to us Lutherans? Why wasn't Martin Luther squashed?
Oh, because he was big.
The Turks were invading Europe. The Turks got as far as Vienna in Austria. And the Holy Roman Empire, ruled by Charles V, which was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. You maybe have remembered that, right? It's basically this conglomeration primarily of German princes. But Charles V needs all the help that he can get to hold off Suleiman the Magnificent. So horrible things happen, Istanbul falls, and here comes the Muslims, and this is a horrible thing that's happening to Christian Europe, and yet God's using that to protect the very beginning of the Roman or the Lutheran Reformation. So this is 1450s AD. By the 1900s, the Ottoman Empire has been greatly reduced. This is in 1914, and the Ottoman Empire made a mistake in 1914. They sided with Germany. They didn't start World War I, but they sided with the wrong side. They sided with the side that lost in the treaty, and so the Ottoman Empire was greatly reduced to what we would call Turkey today in the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, after the World War I is over. And right about that time then, the last Sultan was deposed, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk founded the Republic of Turkey, and we will see statues to Ataturk. And that brings us to today. So that is I made it in 30 minutes. So questions that you guys might have about history, and then I'm going to talk about the trip, and I'll stop the recording.
Yes. Back in 1760, Germans and other people in Europe started going to Russia because they were invited by the Queen of Russia,
Catherine's great.
Catherine the Great. My ancestors went from Germany to Russia,
All right.
So
and they settled on the Volga River north of the Black Sea. On the Volga River, there was German villages on the Volga River,
In what is today,
which is probably eastern Ukraine.
yeah.
And in 1902, my grandmother came from Russia, in a little village on on Volga River. 1902, her family left
Went
Russia.
actually into the Caspian, so they are farther over, so that they would have been in Russia, not in the Ukraine. I thought they would have been.
Yeah, it's kind of east of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But in 1902, my grandmother, on my mother's side, her whole family came to the United States in 1902. And they were ancestors of the people that left Germany in 1760.
Oh.
And my grandfather, whom she married in America, he came from a village on the Volga also.
Yeah.
In 1907, he came over with his first wife. And then he lost her, and then, but anyways, that whole history of the Germans going to Russia and then out again,
And here's our Wells connection. Not just you personally, but in 19 what was it? What were we celebrating? I think it was 1980. Oh, it was the 500th anniversary of Luther's birth in 1983. The Synod was looking for some kind of something to celebrate, some way to celebrate, and they landed on beaming German language worship services into that part of Russia because there were still German Lutherans in that part of Russia.
really,
And that went on for at least a decade or two.
that's such a period.
Yeah, probably.
During the
Yeah.
Bolshevik.
Any questions on what we talked about tonight, though? Aaron.
So post Constantine, how much of the conquering and all that, both from the Roman side and like the Arab side, was like religion motivated, and how much was like, hey, let's expand the empire motivated, or were they kind of one and the same?
Or for the Roman Empire, it would have been just controlling territory, right? And basically they were going backwards after Hadrian's time, they were going backwards. There were a few times like Justinian was really powerful, but was religion what was motivating Justinian? I know he was very religious. He built Hagia Sophia, but I'm not sure if spreading Christianity was what was all about. I don't know. And it was interesting too that there is this, we confess the Nicene Creed, right? That confesses that Jesus is true God, right? He is homoousia. He is of the same essence as God. The Arians said he was like God, homoousios. And that was a religious battle that went on between Roman emperors who became after Constantine. Some of them were Arian and some of them were Orthodox, and so there was religious battles going, more like civil war rather than conquest war. Yeah. And then, of course, the Muslim conquest was taking, spreading the Muslim faith. Yeah.
Um, was Greece in the Eastern or the Western Roman?
Greece was in the Eastern Roman Empire, right?
That's why
It-
we still date things differently than we do.
Yeah, so the dating that we use today is the Gregorian calendar, and the Eastern Roman Empire did not adopt the Gregorian calendar. So they still use the Julian calendar from Julius Caesar. Gregorian calendar is about 400 AD.
I worked with a lady, Greek, and what's the church? Eastern, it's Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox, right?
And Jewish men were telling me how wrong we have it because in our dating, because they all do it that way.
Right.
It was in joking.
Yeah. It's a couple of weeks different. Yeah. So it was Pope Gregory, and the Eastern. There was already a divide in the Christian church then. So
Yes, sir. Muslims had before Muhammad. Who were they all praying to at that point?
Well, Christianity was very strong in that area, right? We know Christianity as it moves to the West, because that impacts more of the history that we're familiar with. But Christianity was also moving to the East. And so there was a very strong Christian presence. But in that area of Mecca and Medina, from what I've read, they were primarily just, pagans worshiping a variety of gods. And Muhammad's, Allah is the one God, and he unified everybody that way. Anybody else?
Do you ever think of him as an antichrist? Allah. I mean, not being the.
Well, that's why I was smiling. It's like, well, there's a lot of antichrists, right? Things that are instead of Christ. Antichrist is really an instead of Christ. So certainly he would be one of the instead of Christs that Satan has raised up, false teachers that have Satan has used to try to destroy God's church, but not. We wouldn't call him the Antichrist.
Because, they accept Jesus, as a great prophet, one of the greatest. And all the Old Testament believers that are, the Abraham and all those are part of their faith.
They go back to Ishmael, I think, right? Yeah, Isaac and Ishmael. So they claim descendants from Ishmael. Yeah, so that's part of the if you want to watch a very interesting summary of Jerusalem history, is Rick Steves did a nice job about a year ago, right after the attack by the Hamas, where he was trying to show the two different perspectives. You might want to watch, Rick Steves' Jerusalem. But one of the things he mentioned is Jerusalem is a very holy city for the Muslims, not only because supposedly Muhammad took a night ride up into heaven from the Temple Mount, but also because they honor Jesus and Mary, and so that's their history too. So, yeah.
Yeah,
There's the way I think the way for you to think about the Palestinian and Israeli conquest is I claim your home and you claim your home.
um, in the library here about whose land is it. And the Arabs were never actually pushed out of that area, but the Jews were. So that there were very few Jews left, so that after the Holocaust, they wanted to come back.
Palestinians have been living there for centuries.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, well, that's the challenge. Truly, it is. Imagine two people claiming the same house. Let's find a compromise. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. So, all right. I'm going to pause my recording. I can't. Is that stop? Yep.